Hi, Steve.
Hey, Christy, how's it
I'm,
going?
it's so good. I'm laughing because we've talked a few different times over the past few months, and each time we both were like, we could continue talking about whatever the
Yes.
topics were. And that led me to just say, why don't you just jump into the series and share what you were lighting up about, which was then lighting me up. And and now here we are. So I just love how that all came together and our schedules came together perfectly.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful and honored that you thought of including me in the series. So thank you very much for having me as a guest.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you have such, I was saying this offline too, you have such a well balanced essence of stability and heart. And I feel, I'll say like warmth and competence. I'll
Mm,
say that. And I feel that that's not an easy feat.
thank you.
So
Yeah.
I was so happy to have you on. And I love that you're a coach as you are a business owner. I just love that because I feel like we're going to be speaking primarily about the democratization of coaching in a little bit. But I just feel like the story of how your company Strive for More came to be, I would love for you to share it with people because you had like a past life career.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, several actually. So great question. Short version of that is I started my career as an engineer. And when I was younger and figuring out what do I go to school for, I didn't know, but I knew I had a brain that worked well that way. I had a lot of family members who were engineers. And as a young kid, I decided to go to school because I could get a degree, which makes it easier to get a job. And I needed one of those to support myself because unless you or our listeners know anything different than I do, I don't foresee that constraint ever going away from life. And we need to be able to support ourselves regardless of what that looked like. So actually, as a young kid, I focused on that versus am I going to truly be happy and enjoy that? So when graduation rolled around, I realized, well, I don't want to do engineering for 40 years. So maybe I need to figure this out. And I said, well, what's the opposite? What's different? Gets me out of the office, deals with people. And then most importantly, has a significant amount of meaning for me. So within that, I focused on law enforcement and then specifically the FBI because of who they are, what they do, and then the caliber to which they do it. So over the next couple of years, I actually had to work as an engineer to meet eligibility requirements to apply to the FBI. So I worked in coal-fired power plants and then nuclear power plants. I did control system design for them. And then thankfully, after a couple of years, I met my eligibility requirements, applied to the FBI, went through that process, got in and became a special agent. Had a wonderful, wonderful career. I primarily specialized in healthcare fraud investigations, also do intellectual property crime. So if you watch movies and you see that anti-piracy warning, we would do investigations in that arena. Did drug investigations as well, and then had a hand in gang, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, and probably most importantly, child pornography investigations. So I'm very proud of what I was able to do. I had a lot of great success, and I realized it had a lot of meaning and purpose for me, but I'm also working 70 to 90 hours a week to get to the level of management I want to be at. It's another 3 to 4 cities over 7 to 10 years. So do I want to go down that path? While I was very fulfilled, there was still something that was a little bit off. So I hired a coach at that time actually to help me figure that out. Did I stay or did I leave? And as we're having this conversation, I'm sure people can guess that I did end up leaving, but I left knowing I wanted to get into coaching because coaching could transfer that meaning and purpose I had as an agent, but onto a wider scale. During the same time frame, I could arrest, say, 3 or 5 people. I could work with hundreds of people, see the impact I have on them, and then that ripple effect it has on the people around them. So with that, kind of getting to your question of where did I end up with my own company, I knew I needed to really kind of restart my career, I guess, really getting into a third direction, right? From engineering to FBI agent to now to coach. How do I do that? So I went back to school to get a master's in organization development and leadership. I got my professional coaching certificate, which is the background in education to do coaching. And then very self-servingly, I got a lot of fitness related certifications because I love doing marathons and triathlons, as you know, and then I'm fortunate enough to compete nationally in triathlons and do Ironmans as well. But it holistically rounded out that ability to really understand true behavior change and be able to work with people holistically, not just on the mentality side of it, but also on the physical side, should I want as well, or should they want, excuse me. So that led to me founding my own company, Strive for More, which I run today, that really focuses around the mental mastery side of the house. Because I do truly believe if we master our mindset, we can master everything else.
Yes, totally agree. And like all guests that come on the series, I have you guys do a questionnaire. I love the questionnaire because I love learning about you guys behind the scenes. And when I asked, like, what do you want to focus on with our conversation? You're like, okay, so if mindset's the umbrella, there's so many pieces to that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to share one piece that stood out to me of what you listed. And then if there was one of the within the list, one that stood out to you that out of all of them, you feel maybe is foundational to where even to start with mindset, I would love for you to share that after.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I love the idea of clarity of what the person wants, the individual wants, with a strategy, because there is such, I just got so excited. I felt my body just because because it's so like, that is like, when we talk about manifesting, it can get super wooified. And it's
Yeah.
like, you need a strategy because that's the ground, literally the ground. So at the same time, being only ground and no vision, then you're limiting yourself. So I look at that as that phrase, keep your feet on the ground and your head in the clouds feel. And when you look at that, where coaching comes in is bringing it together. So all of a sudden what was here is now in the world, and you're like, oh my gosh, that actually happened.
Yeah.
And that has so much in between is mindset. It's
Right.
so much mindset. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love it. I think we are very, very action focused today. What do I do? How do I do it? But we often forgo the very first fundamental step, to your point, which is clarity, understanding what it is that we truly want. But in addition to that, I'll add what's up here in my mind that actually is holding me back. Because I'll use this example. A lot of times in the corporate space, we may be a manager invited to a meeting with a bunch of vice presidents. So we're sitting there going, man, I'm kind of like the new kid, invited to the grown-ups table. There's a lot of things that they are talking about that I'd love to chime in, but they don't care what I have to say. They've already figured it out. I'm just been kindly invited to the table. Even if I wanted to say something, I've talked myself out of it. So before we even talk about what do I say and how do I convey it to that audience, I have to first overcome what's holding me back, the fact that I think that they are not going to value what I say, or that there's no reason for me to speak up, which is up here in our mentality. So to your point about strategy, I feel that fundamental piece is often missed with the clarity. What's holding me back from actually executing that, not physically, but mentally?
Yeah. And don't you feel like there's so much to this? It's not just a one size fits all, because we all
Right.
have our own life experience. We're all our own person. There is foundational shared human experience and relatability, which is
Yeah.
it's a necessity, right? For the empathy and compassion. And it's also having compassion and respect that we are all so different. We are complex beings, right?
Yep.
So what is going on in this person's head when they're invited to the table? It could be different for everybody. It could be a similar theme, yet how it came to be could be different. So I love that, because when you said what's the possibility of like what's holding me back, it's also what's making me want this. Like, am I really wanting it for me, or am I wanting it because in society I feel like I'm supposed to be hitting these metrics, or am I feeling
Right.
pressure from parents, or am I feeling pressure from partners or
Yeah.
bosses, right? And so the thing I love about that pairing of warmth and competence, which I do believe that in all of our own way, because the coaching market is saturated for good reason, which we'll get to, that really is in our own genuine way. Anybody who's a coach, find your sweet spot of competence and warmth, because that's what will create the individual to feel safe enough to be honest, right? So that's why I love that I sense from you that you have that pairing of
Yeah.
non-judgmental space.
Yeah. Well, even to all the coaches who are listening, there's a great value point in what you're bringing out, because a lot of us who get into coaching are very altruistic. We want to help people. And this is personally something I struggled with at the beginning of my journey as a coach is I want to help everybody. I don't want to necessarily niche. I want to help people. But we hold ourselves back without that clarity, that understanding of who we are, what we truly resonate with, and what kind of struggles or challenges do we want to help people overcome, or what kind of people do we want to help? What are their challenges and needs that they have that we want to solve and we're best suited to do? Because if I am too broad, then it's hard for me to actually find those people to work with. And I may never be able to actually make a living as a coach. So, quick kind of a tangent and aside, it's even true for us as coaches to have that clarity, that warmth, that desire to help people, but also that structure to be able to truly do that.
Totally. Totally. And what you're saying too is because I feel that you're in the vast majority, I was there too. I want to help. I don't want to niche. I'm not going to niche. And then it's that whole, if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. So nobody can
Right.
relate. And then you're in your own way. And it seems so counterintuitive at first because you're like, but I just want to help everybody.
Yep.
You're diluting your relatability to anybody, and you're diluting your authenticity to yourself. So what
Yep.
you're wanting is actually sabotaging your opportunity to get there.
Right.
Not in a
Right.
malicious way, but so how did you just, and just off, like, if you have any tips on how did you start honing your niche?
Yeah. Good question. Couple things I think definitely come to mind to share is number one, I think we can listen to what the universe tells us or what other people tells us. What do we get pushed into? Not in a bad way, like we're getting forced into something, but if somebody always says, athletes really love the work that you do, there may be something to that of maybe you really resonate with athletes and that's a great niche for you. So I think there is an external component that you're going to let your customers, your friends, the people around you, the universe that provides opportunities, essentially listen to what is being opened for you and what other people are sharing with you that can help make it a little bit easier. The other thing I think is personally for you as well. What is it that you want specifically in your life? One of the big reasons when I left the FBI and got into coaching was I've had some incredible leaders in my career. I've also had some absolutely horrific leaders in my career. And a big thing for me is to truly help people be better people. I want this world to be a place where we treat each other respectfully, we inspire each other to be great and follow our hearts. That's my vision statement. I full-heartedly believe that. And that's what I want to create. And the way I like to do that is one-on-one with individuals to be empowered, enlightened in their own lives, and then watch that impact in organizational cultures. So that really helped me understand I do want to primarily be in that leadership and executive space within organizations to not only create that impact for leaders, but also the organization itself. So that's just a little bit about how I found my niche.
Totally. And so easy to follow, like not surprising in the least. Not surprising. You're so clear. And it makes me think of, and I can't think, what's it called when there's like three circles that overlap? It's a vex or something. It's called
The Venn
something.
diagram,
It could be a Venn diagram. Is that what it is? The
and then
circles?
what is it? Concentric circles, is that right?
Yeah. So what you're making me think of, and there's a name for this, is what I just jotted it down. One circle is what you love to do. One circle is what you're good at. One circle is what's needed. And then in the middle is your answer. And that takes some unpacking.
Yeah, yeah. To your point, it's also I think another potential way of looking into some other circles that could come into play is like, what are my experiences? Where do I naturally resonate with folks? And
Mhm.
then I think another part, honestly, is what do people actually pay for? And this isn't just coaching, this is business in general.
Yeah.
I may think I have this greatest product in the world, but does it truly solve a need that people put value in, that they're actually going to pay for? Because if the answer is no, then you don't have a business model. Just a real quick business school aside. So that's also an important element I think that comes into play. What do you love to do? What do your experiences kind of tell you that you are naturally aligned with? What are people going to want solved? And then are they willing to pay for it?
Yeah, it's so true. And so to go off of that, when you were talking about your ultimate desire, right? To
Yeah.
just raise people up and raise their consciousness, because better can get a little misconstrued
Yes, true.
of
Fair.
just adding on, that you're in this just hamster wheel of continuous improvement. And then it's like, okay, where is this coming from? Where is this desire coming from? It? And I heard this once and I love it. Is it coming from loving yourself or loathing yourself? And you got to be really honest. And it's the honesty that I feel often comes when you have an objective person who really cares. So, and you found a way by creating your grit model to really hone this system in to help people what? Tell me in your words, like where did the grit model come from? Is it, or do you even call it a grit model or?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so it's grit, give, recognize, implement, time. I know it's a mouthful, but that's the
let's say it
official
again.
trademark of it. So sorry.
Yep. Give, recognize, implement,
and time.
Time. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And it's broken up actually in that fashion. So real quick, I'll precursor this with emotional intelligence because that maybe makes it a little easier to follow. So emotional intelligence is something most of us are fairly familiar with as a concept. And within it, it has 4 parts. It's got your self-awareness, your self-management, your social awareness, and your relationship management. So there's the concept and then 4 parts to it. It's the same thing with grit. You have give, recognize, implement, and time. So what that really stands for is giving ourselves permission to be human, recognizing we always have a choice, implementing small steps, and then time, literally time. And where it came from was over more than 1,000 coaching sessions. I found it didn't matter what kind of leader you were, what organization you were in, what country you were in, if you were an athlete, a student, corporate professional, it didn't matter. Fundamentally, there were some baseline things to help individuals truly get to where they wanted to go and achieve their goals. And it started with giving ourselves permission to be human, meaning we've got a dual nature, and that's okay. Ups, downs, negatives, positives, or serving and non-serving sides, that as I like to call them. And that's okay. It's a part of who we are, because we can beat ourselves up for saying this part should not exist within me. I should never get angry. And then when I get angry, I'm angry. And now I'm even more angry because I believe I shouldn't get angry. And it's just a compounding effect that eats away at us and has all this draining energy. So fundamentally, if I can help people accept who they are in all parts of them, and that there is a way forward, there is hope, and we can overcome the challenges we're facing, then it allows us to actually be able to go down that journey by fundamentally making it easier and forgiving ourselves and being compassionate. So there is definitely more to that, but I'll kind of leave it there just as a brief intro. And then recognizing we always have a choice gets easier when we understand there's both sides of us, because we don't have to let the non-serving, the quote unquote negative, consume us. And we can embrace what is going to be helpful, allow us to where we want to go, and then implement it one small manageable step at a time, versus being overwhelmed from seeing this whole looming mountain that there's no way I can get to. And then literally the time it takes for us to change, because we're not on demand or Amazon 2-day delivery as humans.
Sometimes don't we wish we were? I mean, really,
Right,
not all the time.
hence great, Christy, hence great.
Nice marketing in there. So you said a few things I want to pause on. I love it. It makes so much sense. And so what I'm sensing too is that it's a scaffold.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The G is the foundation, then there's the R, and it's clear. I always say it's like you have a dirty window, or I should say mirror, because a lot of times, I just heard this recently on a podcast, I loved it, is we often look out, and the mirror we need to be looking in. So
Yes.
you're giving yourself, you have a mirror and a window in this instance, right? So at first it's the mirror, and you're giving yourself the permission in a safe space to be able to clean it. So you can
Yeah.
see clearly what's there.
Yeah.
And then shift to while you also look at yourself, what can you see outside? And you might need to then clean the window a little bit more, or you might need to swap windows out, really, because maybe your reality is shifting. I love the self-compassion piece. I feel I can go on about that, so I'm actually not going to, or else we're not going to be continuing this conversation in the direction I want you to be speaking to. That is absolutely a huge part. What I realized, though, is when you said recognize, there's so much about listening in and enhancing that strategic intuition. So once you're able to unpack and maybe whatever you speak to, shed stuff, let stuff go, get clearer, you're able to get really clear on what are when you get to recognize there are choices, you can then safely, intuitively go from what one am I being drawn to, resonating with at a vibrational level, versus what do I think I should do? So then it's so cool. So then the implement piece, if I'm hearing this right, I love the operative word small. I feel like that is huge. I feel like that is huge. I did not mean to be doing an oxymoron there, but I love that, because then once you're more in tune intuitively, then the sustainability of the chain of the habits that you're going to be doing, the actions are going to be from such a more of a place of integrity. And then you're going to be able to measure it with time, because you're going to have more of a desire and focus to follow through.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's, I'll share a little secret behind it. I am a big cognitive behavioralist at heart. And I do fully believe we are holistic as humans, the mind-body connection. We hear that a lot, the spiritual connection. It's all true. We're very interconnected, and it's not one removed from the other. And so a lot of cognitive behavioral evidence-based science went into creating, how do we progress somebody from the things that typically hold them back, which is their mindset, their mentality, the beliefs about themselves, to translating that into successful action that also alleviates the mentality that comes with that. Because I could look at what I have to achieve and get very overwhelmed. It's not possible. There's too much of it. How am I supposed to do this? And I'll admit, right, this is nothing that's new. Rome wasn't built in a day is a great example of it. How do we eat an elephant one bite at a time? We talk about these all the time in nature and in society, but how do we actually truly apply that's right for us? Versus like, yeah, okay, I get it. Small step at a time, fine. I understand. How do I do that for me? Right. And this is a way that helps us do that.
I love it. And I just going back to what you were talking about before, that we're in such a doing masculine energy culture, which is, I think the majority of people listening realize it's not tied to sexuality. We all have masculine and feminine energy.
Yep.
And we all have our own authentic balance of what that looks like, where we really feel genuinely in line with ourselves. And so being able to pause, which is the feminine, or if you don't like the wording, you can think of more of that give, receive, right?
Yep.
Just receiving information, understanding, processing. Then you're also giving yourself a chance to make decisions from a place that is just more in line with integrity, but also grounded. And so there's so much from what you're saying. I love the whole GRIT model. For business leaders who are listening, we're going to do a shift to how this can possibly be brought to their entire organization, because it's a very antiquated way of looking at coaching. There's a stigma to it. And I was just reading an article on Forbes that shared 2 of the antiquated ways to look at coaching. I would love for you to just give feedback on that, as well as just your own perspective on democratizing coaching, the need for it all, and the strategy behind it. So, and I love this because it's so true. So two of the antiquated ways of looking at coaching. One was that they were only for top leaders, strong leaders who knew that they had the ability to hone their skills to become even more strong, or possibly, if in the not the best hands, more powerful over versus power with.
Yeah.
And then the second was the fatal flaw, like, we got to fix you if you want to stay with the company. So then there's a fear of job security or rising up or wanting to, whatever it is in your advance in your career. And it's so exploded beyond that. So I would love to hear, just in regards to those old two ways of coaching, and just where you see it going now.
Yeah, great questions. So I've been, I would say, fairly fortunate. I think in my career, had a lot of opportunity to work with individual contributors all the way up through C-suite and athletes and students. So a lot of different folks in 111 plus organizations now across 12 different countries. And I can say, to your first point, it is not just for that top level C-suite. Everybody can benefit from it. And I've seen that very, very clearly in my career, and how impactful that can be, especially if you want to create a really, let's call it a family-oriented, people first, employee first culture in your organization. It can't just be from the CEO down. Now, granted, they do have a lot of say in creating organizational culture, but if you're talking about a 100,000 employee organization, guess what? When you get that far removed from your CEO, yes, they are going to dictate certain elements of culture, but it's going to be your leader. It's going to be your director, your vice president. They're all going to be responsible for those sub pockets of culture. And it's very valuable to have coaching offered to everybody in that organization if you want to instill that type of coaching culture in it, versus just the C-suite, if you will. And a lot of people want questions answered. Where am I going in my career? How do I develop that? How do I become a leader? Like, I want to get to a leadership position, but let's say I'm very technical and I'm great at what I do. Wait, I have to manage people? How do I do that? So without getting too far kind of afield with it, I think there's a lot of value in bringing that into the organization to help people grow and develop.
And to do it, totally, yes. And to do it so that people can be honest without fearing that they have any risk for their job security. There are other fears, sure. The job security one, and I would love your thought on that too. I hear that frequently, that all individuals have their own experience with trusting people. So the coach has to build that with the person as well. And that takes, depending on the person, different length of time. So having that person who's objective, who's able to let you ask any questions that you would be terrified to, like, you might have some sort of performance plan, hopefully, with your direct, supervisor.
Right.
And sure, that's strategy. If you have concerns about questions and it's holding you back from meeting it, in an ideal situation, you'd be able to go to your direct supervisor and really ask those questions. Like, I see this and I feel kind of silly asking this, but fill in the blank. Sometimes you don't, though. So being able to have that objective perspective from someone outside is so helpful in building future leaders for the company.
Yeah. The number one piece of feedback that I get from my clients is, thank goodness you were an external, unbiased third party.
Yeah.
And I do value organizations that instill a coaching culture in their organization and do it internally. I think there's value in having coaches available. I used to believe that I could help companies set that up, but after hearing that just for years now, I truly believe in having your coaching be external to the organization, because I find, to your point, Christy, people do not feel as comfortable opening up to people internally, even internal coaches, because they're still in the back of their mind is, is this person truly an unbiased party because they work for my company? And I think there's great value in what you've brought out is it is a non-judgmental, non-biased, open, warm, safe space for people to ask these kind of questions. And that's another reason why, to your point, coaching should be a democratized offer to everybody and give you that outlet to grow and develop, in addition to, say, EAP and other programs that organizations have.
100%. And it also, so there are a few things. So and you were reading my mind because I was going to ask you what your perspective was on internal, external, and building the coaching skills within management. So
Yes.
I'm with you about the external coach. And I there probably are benefits for internal, and at the same time, I see your point for sure. I
Yeah.
do feel that both can happen. So you can have an external coach, and you could simultaneously be building the coaching skills within your idea. I mean, really, what a
Yes.
benefit. I say that to so many clients. I say, you have such a benefit right now because you're the coachee. You're also can put the hat on to the side. That's also almost taking a class in a way of like, oh, I love that question. I want to ask my direct report that question or whatever it is. And what a bonus. You mean, talk about major return on investment. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's spot on. So I think that it is definitively helpful in coaching to coach managers to be coaches. And actually, that's a lot of what I think does go on, right? How do I have this performance review? How do I coach and develop and grow others? So oftentimes, when that is a focus with my clients, I'll prompt them, what is it that you take away from our time together? What do you see me do and how that happens? And then along the way, also be open to picking up those things. And then we can talk about them and how to apply that for you specifically and how to instill that coaching with what you want to do for your folks. So I will do exactly what you've said, is help people see not only what am I doing, but how can that be applied for them in their specific scenarios as well.
Yes. And to expand on that too, democratizing coaching also allows for there to be an element of genuinely living your values. And so there's nothing I find just from myself, and also what I'm hearing from clients as well, is not having clear core values for an organization. There's possibility there. Having core values and preaching and not practicing actually is so much worse than not having the clarity, right?
Yeah.
So so what I'm hearing is democratizing, if a value of yours really is family oriented or community oriented, however you look at business, right? Or respect, like if you're saying we value respect, or having it go up and down all the way to the people in the mailroom or the people who are running the building. Yep. There's nothing. It reminds me of the scene in do you watch Ted Lasso? I bet you do, because you're a sports and coach guy. I mean, come on. The scene where he fixes the shower head.
Yeah.
And that's like, they're just quickly for people who are listening or watching, it's the scene where Ted Lasso just started as coach. Of course, their ears are up, like, what's up with this guy? Can we trust him? What's the deal? They're used to being treated poorly, so they're kind of like, whatever. And so he's like, all right, what do we need to, what can I help you with, pretty much? And someone throws out, it might've been Roy Kent, I'm not sure, but someone throws out like the shower pressure sucks in the locker room.
Right.
And then it's just kind of a passing thing. And then the player goes into the shower, goes to turn the shower on, and gets blasted with intense pressure. And in that moment, immediately trust and respect go up.
Yeah. And you're nailing it, because we can't just talk the talk. We have to walk the walk as well. And it's very important that these paper values be truly lived values in an organization. And I'll share that, unfortunately, I find oftentimes they're not. And that is a big factor in disengaging employees, because, we purport to do this as an organization, but that's just in name only. It doesn't actually happen. So why do I want to be a part of that? So it's a very valid point that you're bringing out. it's an even greater argument to your second point in there of democratizing coaching. And here's what I mean by that. Culture in an organization essentially gets formed when the organization starts out and starts having success. These rules or unwritten rules, these ways that we go about things that leads to that success get ingrained within that organization and often become that unseen bottom layer of unspoken rules and expectations within organizations. So when you're trying to write something in an organization and change that culture, we have to get to that deep-seated level to unearth what are these written rules that we have to overcome and then start doing that. And it does take a top-down approach, typically from that leader at the top to do that. But it takes everybody else as well. Great example. Let's just say, I'm going to pick a random company name. All right. So let's just say FedEx brings in a new CEO, and the new CEO wants to shift and change the organization into a new direction. Because CEOs can be up and out in 2 to 3 years, there's a lot of senior managers and directors and vice presidents who've been there for 25, 30 years, like, oh, they're gone in 2 to 3 years. I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to change. So there's value in doing it at every level of the organization, because even down to the individual contributor level, we are responsible for the culture in the organization. It isn't just top down. Even though they have a little bit more sway in creating that culture, everybody's a part of it.
I have nothing to add. Nothing to add. Period. Exclamation mark, whatever you want. Just beautiful. So if there is anything that, so for any business leaders in any level who are listening, but let's say decision makers, right? The ones who actually can make the decision and bringing coaching in. Because I'm thinking a few thoughts. And so I'm going to pin my question for you to connect it. So I'm going to go back to something you said that led me to this question, which was taking the I specifically in G.R.I.T about implementing small, so that you're not over promising and under delivering, right? Because it's not about having a sheet of paper or like a one-off workshop where, or even really like, let's go to a fancy place for a retreat with warm weather, and then you come back and nothing gets sustained. That might've been great then, but then it's like, okay, but we're not continuing, we're not moving forward. Any leaders, I will say, who are at the top, who have more of that influence and impact, who are leaning a little towards what you're saying and maybe a little bit back and they're on the fence about, okay, what would this look like? What would be the first step that they could take to gain some clarity on that?
Yeah. So the first thing I love to ask prospective clients when I talk to them about their organization is, what are the goals that you have? Right? What are your top needs or challenges or struggles? All different ways to essentially vet out what is most important to you. And so that's the fundamental place I would start is, what is it that you're looking to achieve? And is that something we've essentially confirmed within the organization? Perhaps we know systemically our organization is siloed and information is not shared openly. That could be a very real thing we hear from the organization. We could also maybe hear, and unfortunately this still does exist, we've got managers who berate people, belittle people, scream at them. There's something very true about people quit people. So that's the very first thing I would ask is, what is it that you're really looking to change within your organization? Because when we know that, then we're able to clearly outline what are the objectives we'd like to see, what's the impact that's going to have on you, and then help define what the success criteria would be for whether it's coaching or any other thing that you bring into the organization. You'll have true clarity around that. So kind of small upfront work that's driven by real tangible information from inside the organization.
Yeah, which is totally coming full circle to the beginning of our conversation about the clarity of what the person wants and then how to create that strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, you just spoke exactly to pretty much any CEO or president out there right now who may be in like, this is what we want. Okay, well, here's the strategy. the beauty about them consulting with you or coaching with you is that they can share honest fears. They're not going to be able to share it with the board. They're not going to be able to share that with the rest of the leadership team, because they're going to be the steady anchor. And at the same time, for them to be the anchor and not like a inflexible rod, they need to be able to be honest and human to someone who is objective. So I just feel like there's so much awesome stuff there. The managers berating, it does happen. That's the other thing that I feel is really helpful. That's a whole other conversation. I did want to add though with that, internally promoting has so many benefits. And the more you create that foundational, the value system of the foundation, every decision can come back to that. So there's a relief. And when you have that value system created, not just by the president or CEO, but also all the stakeholders who are involved, right? When they then there's like this team, like, oh, we're on the same team. Doesn't mean that it's going to be super easy in decisions. They're going to be clearer. So when you're internally promoting, it's going to shift from what could have possibly been an old norm of, well, they've been here for 20 years and because the power, money, the title, that is very temporary. That's the responsibility is huge. I can feel you chomping in there. So yes, add to that briefly, and then we'll have you back on to unpack that more.
Yeah. So very briefly, I'll touch on two quick things. One of the things that you asked about earlier that I apologize I didn't cover yet was, do we offer coaching essentially in that regard of rehashing somebody's career or last ditch effort? To that point, I do not believe coaching should really be used in that fashion, because that person going into it knows it and makes them harder disengaged. And ultimately that person is going to end up most of the time choosing to leave the organization anyways, because they know that it's not presented in a true caring manner, but in a way that's essentially saying, this is a last ditch effort to try to bring you up and before we fire you. So to that point about internal promotion, I just wanted to make sure I covered that for you. One thing to add real quick to what you just brought out is there's so much value in looking at what is it that we have done and that hasn't worked over those past 20, 25 years. Leadership training is very common in our practice. One thing I will say is we like our kind of Band-Aid patch fixes versus what's going to truly create that change we're looking for. If we've done training over the past 20 years and we still face the same problem, maybe we should explore something that's a little bit different. And it gets back to understanding what is it that we're truly looking for, and then what's going to do that, like a leadership institute, like coaching, things that help people walk through the practical application and coach them over time and develop them over the time it takes to ingrain those new skill sets and mentalities within them, versus something that maybe I'll walk away with 3 key elements from this 4-hour training, and then a month and a half later, I forgot what it is.
So everything you're saying, I'm just going to cliff note into where they want to versus have to.
Yeah.
Right? Like, absolutely. So this was so fantastic. One tip to close us out that you would give any business leaders who are listening. I shared my favorite mindset from the list that you wrote.
Yeah.
What's one from that list that you would say, if you're going to start shifting your mindset because you want to into more of this coaching perspective of creating this community within your organization, where would you say they start?
It starts with us. I firmly believe that it all starts with us internally. So I would ask, what is it that we perhaps face and struggle with, because we're not alone in that. And imposter syndrome has a coined phrase for it for a very specific reason. So I would start there. For us specifically, what do we challenge by and struggle with? And can we bring awareness to that? Because it's a safe bet. A lot of other people in your organization feel the same way. So I would start there.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's where, having a coach, and to close out, we had said at the beginning that it's a saturated market for good reason, because You're going to resonate with some, you're not going to resonate with others. And that's where you really check in with yourself, who you're connecting with. If you're going to make substantial change, you need to be able to resonate with the coach so that you feel safe enough to be honest with
Yes.
yourself and with them.
Yeah.
It's essential. Steve, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you're doing in the world. It's so necessary and it's essential and so appreciated. When people want to learn more about you and strive for more, where can they go?
Yeah. My website is striveformore.com, and the word for is FOR. So strive, FOR, more.com. And then I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. The handles are Strive for More LTD. So for limited, except for Twitter, it's LT because of Twitter character requirements. So you can find me there, and then my personal LinkedIn profile as well for Stephen Nathenson.
And we'll have all of those down in the notes as well. So for people who just want to click and go directly to their platform, social platform of choice. Steve, thank you so much. And I look forward to having you back on.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Christy. I love it, and hope to continue this conversation.